That guy's name is Johann Eck. Yeah, he's German. Eck takes on Martin Luther in a public debate, and we go, oh, yawn, debate. Hey, if you do not have YouTube, you do not have television, you don't have smartphones, you don't have Facebook, public debates are hot stuff. Everybody wants to go see it because what else are you going to do? Now, when Eck takes on Luther, Luther loses bad. But the thing is, Eck actually helps Luther out in formulating what Luther really thinks. When Luther and Eck argue, Eck asks Luther about indulgences, and of course Luther says they're terrible. He says that the Pope doesn't have the right to hand out forgiveness. He goes back to that verse in Romans and says forgiveness comes from God by faith. And Eck says, oh, whoa, hey, wait a minute. Are you questioning the authority of the Pope? Are you saying the Pope is not the voice of God on earth? Are you saying the Pope is not always right? And Luther says, yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. I'm not going to respect papal authority. I don't think any human being should have that kind of authority to hand out forgiveness from somewhere in heaven. That's God's job. I'm not acknowledging that the Pope is always right. I think the Pope can be flawed. And Eck says, whoa, dude, okay, so where are you getting authority? What about church councils? And Luther says, well, I respect church councils. And Eck says, okay, dude, all right, fine. So you respect church councils? All right. There's this guy who proposed the whole idea that indulgences are bad, and he questioned the authority of the Pope. His name was Huss. And he was burned at the stake for heresy by a church council. So, he's saying exactly the same stuff you're saying, Luther, and a church council declared him a heretic. So, are you saying you don't respect church councils either? And Luther kind of has his back to the wall at that point. Either he's going to admit he's a heretic and his butt gets burned, or he has to say he doesn't respect church councils. And Luther says, no, I reject church councils. And Eck says, oh, that's it. You're in trouble, man. Now, Luther here actually rejects the power of the Pope. Luther rejects the power of church councils, and Eck says, okay, dude, you just rejected every authority the church has. So, are you the authority? Are you always right? Where are you getting your stuff from? And Luther finds himself back down to one source of authority, and this is going to be really important. That one source of authority that Luther says he accepts is the Bible. No Pope. He says the power of the Pope is a power that was created later on by men who wanted an authority. It does not come from God. He refuses to respect the power of the Pope. He says church councils are made up of human beings and they can make mistakes. He says the only authority that he respects, the place where he gets his information from, is the Bible. The only thing he respects, sola, only, solely, is the Bible, scriptura. Sola scriptura is going to become the central point of the teachings of Martin Luther and those who follow him. Only the Bible is the authority that they respect. Nothing other than the Bible, all right? Only the Bible, sola scriptura. Papal documents, church council documents, no, those are human documents. Mistakes can be in there. They can be flawed. They do not respect doctrine that comes from those things. Instead, they go back to only the Bible. Now, this causes a whole bunch of problems. Luther finds himself in an awkward situation here. But Luther is a smart dude, and Luther takes advantage of what he's got. Luther begins writing like crazy and printing everything on printing presses. Luther writes so much that it's said that throughout his life, Luther manages to keep 3 printing presses going all the time, 6 days a week. Luther's ideas spread across his country. His country is the Holy Roman Empire. Now, you've got to understand a couple things about the Holy Roman Empire before you understand what else is going on in the background here. Martin Luther is writing, he's printing like crazy, he's protesting indulgences, he's challenging the power of the Pope, he's saying that you don't get into heaven through good deeds, you get into heaven through faith, and his ideas are really catching on across the Holy Roman Empire. Now, The Holy Roman Empire is made up of a bunch of small areas, or like mini countries. If you look, you can see them. There's Franconia, there's Saxony, that's where Luther's from. There's Holstein, it's not just a cow anymore. There's Verona, there's Lombardy. Those areas are all part of the Holy Roman Empire. Now in the HRE, in the Holy Roman Empire, every one of those little areas reports back to the Holy Roman Emperor. But each one has a small ruler. So you can think of it almost kind of like, it's not. It's a bad analogy, but it's the best one I can give you. It's kind of like the states in the U.S. Every state has a governor, and all of those governors report then to the president, all right? That's kind of how Germany works, all right? Individual areas of the Holy Roman Empire have leaders, they have lords, and those lords report to the main emperor. Now, there are a couple things in the background here that you got to keep in mind. Number one, tax money collected does not just go to the government. All taxes collected, a percentage of that has to be paid to the church, because the church is central and religious authority outranks secular authority. So if you are a local government official and you're collecting 6% in taxes, of that 6%, a portion of that has to go to the Pope. There's a lot of resentment about that because people want to keep their money at home. There's also the question of monastic property. When people die, one of the good deeds that they can do to earn themselves heavenly brownie points are leave their monies to the church and their land to the church. So in their will, they will leave part of their property to the church. That property is then taken in, adopted by the church, and administered by monks. That property makes a lot of money for the church because the taxes, the goods, the services on that land belong to the church, and monasteries take that revenue and use it to fix up their monastery, and they use it to take care of the poor. We'll get back to that a little bit later because that's going to be a really big deal. At this period in time, the government does not take care of the poor. None of your tax dollars would go to taking care of poor or homeless people. Instead, that's the job of the church because it's a moral responsibility, not a social responsibility. Much of that land is not actually under the control of the Holy Roman Empire. It's under the control of the papacy in Rome. Now, who is in charge of the Holy Roman Empire? Well, actually, there is a very powerful gentleman named Charles V. Now, Charles V, you may never have heard of him, but he is the most powerful man in the world in the mid-1500s. Charles V is from a family called the Habsburgs. If you're looking at that picture of him and going, dude, his chin is huge. Yes, it is. We'll get back to that later. Habsburgs are hardcore inbred, and they have some interesting physical characteristics. Charles V owns just about everything. What do I mean by that? Well, Charles V is in charge of Spain. That means he's also in charge of everything Spain owns in the New World. That's like all of Central America, part of South America, Florida, yeah. He owns all of that, and he owns Spain. He owns the Netherlands, he owns Austria, and he is one of the possibilities, actually, for taking over the Holy Roman Empire. He wants to be Holy Roman Emperor when he grows up, because if he gets to be Holy Roman Emperor, he owns absolutely everything. All right. Everything you see here in green and orange, or green and red rather, I should say, belongs to Charles V as Holy Roman Empire. All right. Now, with the Holy Roman Empire, the HRE thing, these countries, basically Charles V can own most of the world if he can take over the Holy Roman Empire. With that kind of power and authority, he will be the most important man in the world, and his only competition for this is the King of France, who also wants to be Holy Roman Empire. Luther has to walk a fine line because he doesn't want to cause trouble for himself. He's got two people to worry about. Even as much territory as he owns, he has to worry about two other guys as his competition. Now, his two main competitions are the King of France, Francis I, awesome-looking gentleman on your left. Francis desperately wants to get the job of the Holy Roman Emperor because that would make him competition for Charles V. His other concern is that guy on your right-hand side. I know you're all looking at his hat and you're all like so jealous. That actually is the emperor of the Ottoman Empire, the Turkish Empire, Süleyman I. Süleyman is a huge power in the world, rivaling Charles V. And as a Muslim emperor, he feels that it is part of his duty to Allah to take over the world and submit it all to God. Now, that means that Charles and Francis are wrangling over who's going to get to be Holy Roman Emperor, and Suleiman doesn't care as long as he gets to take over.